actually know how we connected. So it's some way through Nina, correct?
Right. So what I kind of remember what happened was you wrote something about, oh, I think it might have been something I was doing. I was posting stuff, and maybe it was more on my doctor's site, not my Human Body Detectives,
Right.
about edible plants and flowers. Because I'm a big
I remember
believer.
that it was about mental health and how flowers help with your
Yes.
well-being and
I,
things you
I, yeah.
self-care.
I almost tell every woman patient, buy yourself flowers and don't buy the ice cream. But so I think I posted something like that, and then you posted something like that in your newsletter.
I think
And
I quoted you. I actually quoted you in my, so every Sunday night I send out an update with like behind the scenes of what's happened on the farm for the,
uh-huh.
and I include like pictures and recipes and stories and all of that. So I do remember this now. Yes.
Yeah, and but
Okay.
it wasn't Nina who saw it, it was Nina's mom.
Okay. Yes.
And so then Nina's mom was like, because I mean,
So I don't
Nina's
actually know Nina. I have never met Nina.
okay. Well, and I can't
I do
think
know Ginny very well.
Jenny. I was thinking
Yeah.
Mrs. Botten because I mean I've known her since I was, I don't know, 7 or 8. It's like
Okay.
Mrs. Botten, you know. And her
Right.
mom and my mom were really good friends. And my little sister and Nina were best buddies. So
Oh.
I mean, I've known Nina since she was like 4. So yeah, so then Ginny, Mrs. Botten, sent it to Nina, and then Nina sent it to me, and that's when we like
Okay, so that's
got
how.
to,
So I
yeah.
have met Nina's kids. Like Ginny has
Oh,
brought them to the farm, and we've given them a tour before. But I've never, like, I really hope someday soon I'll be able to meet
oh, I
Nina.
hope so too. She would love it. So she,
Terrific.
yeah, I love Nina, and she's so good at everything she does. I mean, she's 10, 12 years ago as I started that book series called Human Body Detectives.
I love it.
And it was just because I was going in the classrooms to help out with my kids' teachers. And I was like, I don't know what to talk about. So I would talk about food. And then they're like, well, how does it get into like how does it work? Like when we eat, what happens? So I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about digestive physiology. So I put those two together. And the teachers were kind of like, this is great. And then I started bringing stethoscopes and flashlights. We'd look at the back of the mouth and listen to the stomach. And some other teachers were asking me to come in. And so that kind of made me think this is a need, and kids love it, and teaching them, how food feeds them so they can do stuff. So that's kind of how it evolved. And there was no other books. There still really isn't any books out there that way that
And it's
combine those two.
missing. It's missing in our traditional medical school system.
Oh
And
yeah, for
missing
sure.
in the classroom, and it's missing in people's homes. And it's so unless you are well connected with a naturopath or somebody who is into some sort of nutrition or healthy eating, people, they don't know. And a lot of people think they're actually eating healthy when they
I
really
know.
aren't.
Okay, Becky, so nice to meet you.
Great to be here.
And I want to know your story because I'm so fascinated with what you're doing. And like, how did you get into, like, did you grow up on a farm, or did you like move from Toronto to, because you're in Ontario, if nobody knows that yet.
And so right now we live in a little village just north of Kingston, Ontario.
Oh,
So
okay.
about 20 minutes north in a little village called Sydenham. I actually did grow up on a farm in the Kingston area. And we had horses, and my parents had a greenhouse business where we had vegetable starts and perennials and a huge market garden. And it was then that I decided I was never going to farm because my friends were off going to the cottage or on, special play dates and swimming pools and all of that. And I was slogging it on the farm, either mucking out stalls or weeding long rows of sweet corn in the garden. So that's when I said I was never going to do that. So, and I think at that point, I just didn't appreciate what was being instilled in me either.
Mhm.
So I stayed true to that. I went off to university and got a corporate job in pharma and clinical trials and
Wow.
sort of the business side of health sciences. And it seemed to me increasingly as I got promoted and moved up the ranks, I became increasingly, I would say, more and more miserable. And I would just sort of quit that job to take another, to think that that was going to make me happy. And And it was at that time when we started raising our own food and planting a garden when our boys were young. And it was then that sort of rekindled this love of nature and the land in me. And as time progressed, we just did more and more of that. And then close to 5, it's going on 6 years ago now, my dad actually got really sick. And it was at that time that I was sharing with him just how miserable I was in my job and how unfulfilled I was, and that I really just wanted to farm. I really just wanted to be on the farm. And it was him who inspired me to quit my job and go for it. Like I had nothing to lose. So it's been, we're going in our 6th year of me farming full time. So I quit my corporate job, traded in the suits and the heels for t-shirt and jeans.
Carhartt.
Yeah, Carhartt. Never to brush my hair and, put on all the, to have to look the part. And we've never looked back. Like it has been such a rewarding and positive experience. And I think that I wish I probably would have done it sooner, but I think I have never been happier.
Yeah. Well, the timing is always so important. So the timing was perfect for you. And I love your story, how you did like the hero's journey, like the Joseph Campbell, like you came back home,
Well, and when Mark and I graduated from Queens, we actually lived in Toronto for a few years, and I was never farther from the farm. Like I was eating grocery store meat. We were like we didn't even grow a garden. We were doing all of the opposite of what we do now. Like I don't ever eat anything now, typically. We don't consume anything where we don't actually have either grown it on the farm, or we have farmer friends who grow it, or it's organic, or any of those things. But back in that time, I mean, we were eating everything and anything and never really paid any attention to where it was grown or how it was grown. We would just buy it and consume it.
I know. And and now that you know so much more, it's like you can't go back.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's hard for me too. Like every day I'm always learning more. And I'm like, I don't really want to go eat in a restaurant because I know it's kind of crappy food,
It's true. So. And it's also with farming, but then you notice it. You talked about clean beauty before. It's with that coffee, it's with plastic, it's, and I think that as humans, as long as we're always evolving and educating ourselves, and then making those little choices that will actually have a huge impact. And that's how people eat, even if they just make some little changes in how they're sourcing, or getting to know a local farmer, or asking questions about how that was grown, it would make all the difference to our food system, for sure.
I know. And what I find, and I think it's really important that people hear this part, is that, it's not always an overnight. It's like not if you eat your, pasture raised chicken that's been running around with this nice big yellow yolk, that tomorrow you're going to feel great, but you're going to feel a little bit better. But 5 years down the road, if you keep doing that, you're not going to have to gravitate towards those pharmaceutical medicines. You're going to be able to climb the stairs. Like I think it's just really powerful that it is a long-term lifestyle change that makes you feel good and makes you be able to move your body. And
absolutely. And you're going to feel better because the food is healthier, but you're also going to feel better because of the way that the animals are treated.
Oh yeah.
How the environment as well. So it really is a feel good all around.
I know. That's why actually I tell my patients a lot too, when I'm talking to them and I introduce, when we start talking about food, because that's usually where we always start first, it's important. But I'm always like, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the planet. You're doing it for the animals and the plants and the soil, and and we're so connected to that. So it's benefiting everything.
Absolutely. And I think it's also like through our farm update, it's just actually making people aware. I think we haven't really been educated, probably similarly on our traditional diets, about the impact. So people don't necessarily know, like I always say to people, the monocrop. So for example, when we see hundreds or even thousands of acres planted in one thing, you actually never see that in nature. We need diversity, right? And it's probably the same with when you counsel your patients on diet. you don't just want to eat broccoli. Like we all need diversity
Yeah.
in our systems to be a fulfilling ecosystem. So it's the same on a farm. So we don't want one thing in isolation, because people will often say to us, oh my gosh, you have so many things growing on your farm. We do, but it's intentional. Diversity is so important for our ecosystem, and all of these things synergistically work together to make this flourishing place to be and to grow and to live.
Well, we should maybe segue into why diversity is important, because when we talk about diversity, and when I talk about food diversity, when people are eating, it's like you're feeding different good bacteria in your gut is enhancing your health and helping to your immune system and make the vitamins and minerals, like all of these amazing things that the good bacteria do in our gut. But that's the same thing in the soil. So when you're planting a diverse crop, you're allowing more microbes in the soil to do their thing, which is basically feeding the plant too. Like they are the ones who are grabbing onto the water and grabbing onto any nutrients, and then I don't know exactly how they do it, like, but they send all of the water and the nutrients into the roots, and then it goes into the plant. So, is that one of the big reasons for, for the soil health and for the microbes, because the microbes are feeding the plant, right?
Right, absolutely. So on the way that we describe it on our farm is each of our animals have a superpower on our farm, and their superpower feeds the soil, and they all work together. So for example, our laying hens, they act as fan rakes. So when you rake your grass in the spring, and it sort of takes away all of that dead thatch, lets the crown of the plants see the sunlight, the sunshine, and it will grow. And then they are also fertilizing as they do what they love to do, which is scratch the ground. They're also fertilizing as they go. So that's building the soil. The pigs act as rototillers, so they love to have their nose into the
seen
soil.
My wild pigs. You should see the backyard. They tear apart the backyard.
They're tilling, and the pigs, they can get a little bit overzealous with their tilling. So we actually control their tilling by giving them smaller spots and moving them constantly, consistently. But we will put them on old tired pastures, because they'll root it up. Then we don't have to till it, and then we can overseed it with all sorts of different plants and legumes that are going to also feed the soil. And then the cows actually act as huge lawnmowers. So they're going over the grass and mowing it down, which causes more photosynthesis, which acts as a carbon sink, right? So they're mowing, growing. And we keep them close together, so they're mobbing, and we're trying to replicate there, similar to the bison back on the grasslands, when they would, they move over the grass, they graze it, and then you let it rest. And it's that rest period that actually feeds the soil as well.
Right. So during that rest period, just if people want to talk about photosynthesis, which takes me back to grade 8 biology, but so what happens is the plant grabs on to the carbon, and then the plant makes glucose from the carbon that it gets from the atmosphere, and that glucose is what feeds the nutrients.
Absolutely.
Or the microbes, I mean. And then the microbes are the ones who can use that glucose to give it energy, so we can make the minerals and nutrients that it needs to give back to the plant, right?
Absolutely.
So
it's all in that cycle. And then of course, the big thing being, the healthier the soil, the healthier the plants, the healthier the food.
Right.
So when we look at regenerative farming, we're constantly working on that cycle versus, let's say, conventional farming, where they're just feeding the plant. So when you give fertilizer to a plant, you are basically just giving it a quick sugar fix. So the plant may actually grow, but you're not actually feeding the soil.
Right.
You're just feeding the plant.
That's so important, because the other thing that I have learned, because I did a little reading before we jumped on the phone here, is that, and I'm not a big gardener, but like when farmers and gardeners, they're only giving a few nutrients to the plant, like what is it, nitrogen, potassium,
And phosphorus.
and phosphorus,
Yeah.
right? And so they're only giving those things, but the soil needs iron and magnesium and like all these other minerals. And so they're not replenishing the soil. And that is another reason why a lot of our produce isn't nutrient dense.
Yes, there
Because of
was a
that.
study done. Carrots aren't quite as nutritious as they were 20 years ago. And
Oh
that's
yeah, I think there's lots of studies with that, and I think there's a lot more coming out. And I also read somewhere in the last week that somebody was questioning. It's not so much we need to ask, is it organic, but what's your soil like? So it's like asking more about soil quality versus whether it's organic. And that's another question I wanted to ask. I think it'd be really interesting for people who are listening, is like, when you go to hopefully your farmers to buy food, instead of, I don't know what questions you like to hear, but I have heard that it's actually better not to say, like, almost getting defensive, like, are you organic? Are you regenerative? But more saying like, what's your soil look like? Like, what's your farming like asking more about their techniques in farming versus like almost, I don't mean accusingly, but like kind of pointing their finger, like, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? So like
yeah,
reframing it.
I think for anybody interested in what they're consuming, it's be curious. It's ask
Yeah.
questions and ask them things like, so how do you feed your soil? Because something that is very important and a difference in regenerative farming is that the integration of livestock. So even if you're vegetarian and you just eat vegetables, we really need the fertility of the animals to be in that cycle. It's natural and we need it. So if we're consistently putting on artificial inputs, synthetic fertilizers and all of those things that are just actually taking from the soil, they're actually not really building the soil. That's important, and that's something to ask the farmer. So how do you build your soil?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are organic fertilizers too. So, there are organic pesticides as well. So for me, I would always ask, like, the treatment of the animals, the ethical treatment of the animals. So are the animals in a barn? Are they out on pasture? Are they able to do what they love to do? So if it's a chicken, are they able to scratch the ground and chase after bugs? And potentially, like on our farm, there are insect control. So they eat all the little larvae in the cow plops.
They eat everything.
Exactly. Or if they're a cow, are they standing in one spot and eating soy and corn, which is unnatural to them?
Right.
Are they actually out on the move, grazing, doing what they love to do, and then resting and chewing their cud? So I would ask more about, if you're a meat eater, more about those sort of questions. Like how is the animal living out their days? And is the farmer providing the best life possible for those animals while they're here?
I know.
And then
those are great.
Yeah. And then for vegetable farmers, I think it's just like just being interested in how they're growing things. How are they amending their soil? Are they getting rotted compost? Are they using worm castings? Like just be interested in and then you'll learn things along the way too for your own garden. Are they using compost tea, and how are they making it? And things.
And because you might, and that kind of leads into, like, for people who are wanting to garden this summer and, create a vegetable garden or even a flower garden, I think one of the big things that come up that people get so stumbled upon are A, the weeds, and B, the insects. So what are some of the, I always think ladybugs are really good at like keeping the insects at bay, but like, and I know there's some other plants that are good to integrate within your garden. I think for some reason, I think yarrow is something that's good to put in there that can distract the insects you might not want in your garden. But are there some other measures that people can do?
I think the biggest thing is not to be afraid. Like, just do it.
I know.
And you'll learn from your experience. And it's also a magical thing to be able to put a seed in the ground and for it to grow into something that you and your family are going to be enjoying to eat. One thing I think when we buy vegetables from a farmer, I think if you can have your own diversity in your own yard and be building your soil, you're actually helping the environment that way. So I think lots of diversity in your garden. Try lots of different things. Companion planting, so
Oh
marigolds
yeah,
keep bugs away, but not all bugs are bad. Like we
I
really
know.
want bugs can be also very helpful to us, right? And mulching, we want like the spiders and all of those things in the soil as well, because they're going to help with that diversity in the garden. So we
Right.
want to encourage the pollinators to come. And I would say for pollinators, if you plant en masse, instead of just like a few wildflowers here and there, if you were to, do a row of them, then the pollinators will easily find
Yeah.
the flowers.
So that is kind of talking, and I think people, because we keep hearing these words, biodynamic and regenerative. So when we talk about regenerative, that's like making your land better than it was before, kind of,
Right. So
right?
not sustainable, but
Yeah,
better. We want to
better.
leave it better than the way that we found it.
Right. And so that's kind of, I like the analogy of like when you go camping, you leave it better than when you got there, you're not leaving anything behind. So it's kind of the same concept. And then when we talk about biodynamic farming, that is really when we're bringing, and you talked about this so much, is like bringing in the animals, and like all your animals have these superpowers, and you got to embrace those superpowers and bring those into the land.
Yeah, and it's even simple things like we put up bird houses for tree swallows. So tree swallows eat about 6,000 flies or bugs a day. So instead of getting chemical fly spray for our
Yeah.
cattle, have them rub pest like grossness
Yeah.
on them, we put up these bird houses to encourage birds, those tree swallows, to come and live on our property.
Yeah.
Why not? Then
How great is that?
they're synergistically working together, and it's
Yeah.
nature never gets it wrong. Like
No, they don't.
we just
They just innately know what to do. And
that's
if humans can get out of the way and just like watch and observe, be, our little scientists, and then just kind of copy what they're doing.
exactly. And when we have just one thing in isolation and a lot of it, that is when we need medical intervention, or we need, so for example, feedlots. If we have a lot of cows in a small space eating their unnatural diet, we need to give them antibiotics. We need to give them all of these extra things because they're living in unnatural conditions. And it's not that much different from fields of one thing, so of soybean or of corn. There's no biodiversity there. So we basically we spray those fields with, it kills everything. It kills the good bugs and the bad bugs. It kills the good weeds and the bad weeds. It kills everything but the crop. So I think that if we just could get back to more natural, those, and encourage that biodiversity, those little things will look after themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't, I think we talked about this at the beginning, is that it really doesn't take that much time.
And people will
turn
see
it
it in
around.
their own yards if you just pay attention.
Yeah.
And you start to see things. It's the same with when we teach bouquet making workshops. So you probably know this, but there's like focal flowers, and there's fillers, and then there's spikes, and there's foliage. But all of a sudden, if you teach people how to forage when they're out walking, people will all of a sudden see things from a very different lens. They'll all of a sudden be like, oh, that's a foliage, or oh, that's a spike, or oh, I could use that's a wildflower there, or whatever. So I think it's just paying attention to what's happening in nature, and then trying to replicate it in your own yard, really.
Oh my gosh. And it's so the human body.
Is it?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like when you're aware of how your body is feeling and being, like your body knows what to do. Just innately it's designed to keep a homeostasis, keep a balance, keep your heart pumping, keep your immune system strong. But the minute we start straying away from, not eating very well, or not moving our body, not nourishing it in any way, that's when we have to go down the medical route. So
Exactly.
if we can, just be aware of what our needs are, and trust. It's like trust that the earth and the planet knows what it needs to do, and trust that our bodies know what we need to do. And it's actually quite simple, right?
It is true, because it's true, right? feeding our bodies with food that has been raised unnaturally. So if you're eating, in Canada, if you're eating pork from a grocery store, that pork has never seen the light of day. So there is no vitamin D. There is no,
Yeah, it's
so
heartbreaking.
how is that supposed to nourish and be a nutrient dense to food to our body
Yeah.
when it's unhealthy to begin with, right? Like
Yeah.
so
Well,
I think
yeah, we're so chronically unnourished as a nation. So
which all comes back to the soil and how those animals raise.
it totally does. I mean, we're dependent on them, and so we need to be supporting and loving them because
I
they
think
give it back
also,
to us.
yeah, and it also comes back to just this disconnection between farmers and eaters. I think that, if you even look to 30 or 40 years ago, we had a grandpa or an aunt or somebody had somebody in their life that was farming, right?
Yeah, my
What
grandpa.
happened was, yes, we moved away from feeding communities to feeding the world. So there's less connection. Like people just don't drive by and see somebody like a farmer in the field moving their cattle, or so there's less connection. So that's what we try on our farm is to, because some people just don't know what they don't know.
I know.
Like, so it's just part of just creating awareness about how the food is raised and how they can make different choices that will have a significant impact. Again, a healthier choice for them, better for the animal, and better for the environment.
So that's so beautiful. And I love that so do you open up your farm for people to come and visit? Like how?
So we do have some, we call them farm experiences. So you can come and have a full farm experience and bring a coffee and do chores with us. So you can we move the cows every day.
Yeah, that's so fun.
And collect eggs and do all that sort of stuff. And then we have just like a chicken one where people can pick up a chicken and collect eggs. And then we do some bouquet flower workshops, and we have a bee experience. So Mark is a beekeeper, so we do lots of stuff around honey and raw, unpasteurized honey and prebiotic and so good for us.
Yeah, and the honeycomb.
Yes.
I love eating the honeycomb. So crunchy and gooey.
Oh, good.
I know.
So good. So even little things like that, like how, just letting people know that the honey they buy in a store is not the same as getting it directly from a beekeeper. And even in terms of how, like what those pollinators collected. So what the bees collected when they were making that honey, it helps with allergies. It helps with, skin stuff. It's natural. It hasn't been, there's no high fructose corn syrup added to it. There's, you can label things as 100% pure honey, and it actually doesn't have to be 100% pure honey because different countries have different laws, and
I know.
There's
a lot of skewing that goes on with food marketing. You
don't have to worry about food marketing if you go directly to your farmer,
exactly,
or directly to your beekeeper. There is no giant supply chain in between. It's just you and the farmer, and then that way you can feel good about what you're eating, and you can, that you're supporting your community, you're getting the best food for your family, and you're making a difference to the environment.
Yeah, and your long-term health. I mean, less doctor visits, more energy, sleeping better. So I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer.
I always say to people too, every time they make a food choice, and I think this is a Wendell Berry quote, but every time you make a food choice, you're farming by proxy. And I think that it couldn't be more true in that. Every time you choose to eat this over that, you are either promoting or discouraging the way that either meat or whatever it was produced.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm hoping that where people are listening to this and getting inspired to go to their farmers market, or the summer's coming up. So, I mean, I know it's a little bit. I'm in Hawaii, so there's always things growing here at different times of the year. But I know that in the seasons, the spring and the summer and the fall, that's when you can really hit the farmers markets, and we're coming up into that. So just go for it. Get out there. It's my favorite day of the week.
I love watching your Instagram posts about what you got. And I think it's if you're eating seasonally, you're not relying on airplanes or on, you know, if you're eating strawberries when they're just in season in your community, you know that you're doing the right thing, right?
And
Like
you're eating diversity because you're
exactly, you're not
shaking
eating
it
the
up,
same thing
right?
all the time.
So
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
So
Seasonal
okay.
food to go. And I think also as consumers, we need to be more aware that everything is not always going to be available for us at all times. And I think we've been spoiled, or I don't know what the right word is, but we want to go into a grocery store and have all the things all the time.
Instant gratification, you just want it instantly. But when we talk about that, I mean, I think about my grandma, and I don't do it, but my younger sister is a huge canner. And
Oh,
she,
yes.
so, if you want your strawberries or you want your blueberries, then you start canning and making jams and freezing so you can have those, during the winter months, which is what we used to do like way, way back, salt
Absolutely.
our
It's
meats
a
and
feel
stuff.
good, and it's a feel good activity.
I
And
know,
it's just, and
especially
it's
when you younger kids, it's something you can do together.
and
So,
these sort of things worry me, right? We were actually just talking about this as a family, these lost skills. So if you don't have a mom or an aunt or a sister or somebody that you've actually seen can something or even grow a garden, how do you learn that? And what happens if you have nobody in your family that's going to teach you? So I think it's really important that all of these skills don't get lost, and that we learn from the people that are doing them so that we can carry that on.
right. Yeah, that's so true. So I'm thinking about all the things I haven't taught my kids right now. Although we have garden, I like to bake bread. So yeah, I used to bake bread with my grandma all the time. We only had homemade bread, you know.
Amazing. And
So
in Hawaii, but in Ontario, all eggs have to be washed, and they're actually washed with bleach, which makes the shell porous, which is why eggs need to be refrigerated.
wow. Let's talk
But
about that.
if you are in Europe, you probably have seen that like eggs are on the shelf, right? They're not in a
Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
because it is illegal for European farmers to wash their eggs.
Oh
And
my
that is
gosh.
because when the hen lays an egg, there is this substance called bloom.
Uh-huh.
And it's like this wet, it's like only wet for a few seconds. And it actually seals the egg. So when you talk about nature knowing exactly what it's doing, it seals the egg so that no bacteria, nothing can get into that egg and seals it,
Uh-huh.
which is why truly pastured eggs that have not been washed don't need to be refrigerated, and they will last months. So again,
Yeah,
you leave nature, let nature be.
right. That's a
You're
perfect
fine.
example.
Yeah. Whereas you get messing around with it, you're washing it with bleach, the egg becomes porous, then anything can penetrate that shell.
I know.
Study just released, and they were talking about, they were organic farms, and it was in the city, and they took compost and sprinkled it in half of the homes, their welcome mats.
Oh,
And then they tested the microbiomes of those people that didn't have the dirt in their,
yeah.
and the health of having a little bit of soil in their house, it getting disturbed when they walked in on the mat and then breathing it in, was made that much of a difference in people's lives. So if you happen to buy some fresh eggs and they have a little bit of something on it, it gets onto your hands, it's actually good. Same with like you can garden without gloves on. It's actually good for you to have your hands in the soil.
No, I completely agree with that. But
boys make fun of me all the time for like grounding, but even if you just your feet touch the ground, or your hands touch a tree or anything like that, it's just really good for us.
Oh yeah, you're breathing it in. I've told people to walk outside barefoot first thing in the morning, look up at the sun. I mean, these little things are super powerful for your long-term health.
I agree. And just getting out and feeling the sunshine, or just the wind on your face, it's an instant mood booster. And in these stressful times, I always think, if I'm having one of those days, if I just watch what's happening, if the cows are just laying up on the hill chewing their cud, or it just makes you calm.
I know.
Nature doesn't ever worry about what's next.
No, they don't. And I have to say, when I watched your cow pushing on the wheel of hay. I was laughing so hard. It totally, just watching it. So I think even seeing it and watching it, animals do their thing. It's so beautiful. I
And
mean,
they're feeling spring fever too, right? Like
yeah,
they're like us. They're like
feisty.
shedding their winter coat and they're like, yeah, grass
Yeah,
is
yeah.
growing, and yeah, they feel the same way that we feel when
Sure.
spring comes around.
I know. That was so cute. So,
You just forget what a true spring is like, Heather,
oh,
because
I
you
totally do.
key into that and pay attention to what
Mhm.
the animals are telling us, whether they're in the wild or whether they're in our
Right.
homes. There's lots of communication there between
There are. Yeah, there's a lot. It's just, it always goes back to just being more aware of like
absolutely.
what you're putting in your mouth, your surroundings, observing. We're all little walking scientists, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
So,
think be curious about what's happening, just like what you said, like
yeah.
what's happening around and the synergistic effects of nature. Like again,
Mhm.
nothing happens in isolation or as a lot of one thing in nature.
That's
Um,
super powerful right now.
so diversity is
Yeah.
everything, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, really is on so many ways.
Absolutely.
So, well, you have two baby calves, right?
Yeah, today was like we started off with a bang today. So we had last night, I was pretty sure Allie was gonna have her calf. She was close, but not close enough. And so this morning, Betsy had her calf. She had a heifer calf, no problem. And then Allie had delivered a little bull calf probably about an hour later.
So
So
do you have to help out with that? Like if or do you just wake up in the morning and be like, "Oh, welcome to the world, little calves."
So it depends. If it's a heifer, that means that they've never had a calf before.
Okay.
So if they're first time moms, always we watch very closely and are on the ready for assisting. So that includes like pigs or cows. So and that would require getting up at night and checking if we think they're close, because you just don't know with a first time mom how it's going to go. If they have had calves or farrowed before, we still keep a close eye on them, but not the same as a first time mom. So usually if something's going to go wrong, it usually goes wrong the first birthing experience.
Right.
Now, having said that, so 2 weeks ago, we had to pull a heifer. She had a bull calf and the bull calf was big, and we ended up having to pull him. So once the mom starts to labor,
Mhm.
if it's a heifer and there's no progress, meaning like we don't see feet or anything within a half an hour, then we scrub up and we go in and have a little feel and make sure that everything is in the right position, that they're not upside down or backwards, and that there's enough room
Wow.
for the calf to get out. And we do the same for piglets as well. Like if the sow has started to farrow and then there's a long wait in between piglets, we scrub up and go in, because sometimes they can get turned or they're the wrong way. And then we go in and help them that way, or they can get stuck. But usually once a pig starts farrowing, every 15 to 20 minutes, she'll have a piglet. And then once the cow starts, we like to see progress within a half an hour. Not to say she's going to have it within a half an hour, but we want to see that she's gone from some presentation of feet to more. And then
Right.
if we notice that it's not progressing as well, then we go in and help.
So, do you have a vet on call?
We
Like,
do. We have a large animal vet. And I would say over the years, so we do most things on our own, but when we can no longer, that's when we call the vet. So we've had to have a C-section before. So if we
wow.
reach in and are like, okay, there's no way this calf is coming out, then we call. And really the large animal vets, most farmers learn sort of as they go, and they know when they call a vet. So when we call and it's an emergency, the vet knows like it's an
It's an
emergency.
emergency. Right.
You're not calling for bang now,
Wow.
you know? So like things like that for sure we call for. And then if ever we're unsure of something, so even though we don't ever treat our the animals that we eat with antibiotics, of course we would never not treat an animal if they're sick.
Right.
So sometimes, like let's say we have an animal that has pneumonia. I think it's pneumonia, but I'm not really sure. Let's say it has an elevated fever and I've tried giving it whatever, new floor, let's say, and it doesn't work, then I would call a vet. But we usually try things most things first on our own, unless it's like truthfully like needs stitching or a C-section or something like that. But knock on wood, we don't have emergency calls very often.
Yeah.
But when you do, your stomach is in knots and you feel that sick.
Oh, I can't imagine.
To drive in the driveway and you just know it's, you know, it's serious.
Gosh, yeah, I can. Yeah, that would be really stressful.
It's horrible.
In Michael Pollan's books, I think it was called Second Nature, and he talked about when he was starting to get into gardening and learning more about, because his grandfather was a big gardener, and the book was really beautiful. But he talked about how that the woodchucks in his area would like bulldoze his garden. And he was like, I mean, I think he was pretty young, like 17. It was like he was at war with this woodchuck. But do you have any problems with, and then I don't know if you've seen the movie The Biggest Little Farm.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean with the coyotes and stuff, and even the gophers or was it the snails? And Pearl and I were like, when we were watching them, we were like, put your chickens out there. Because like our chickens would eat everything. And then the next thing they know, they were like, let's put the chickens out there. But like what do you do with these? Do you have problems? Like, I don't even know what a woodchuck is, to be quite honest. I don't know.
Yeah. So I remember on our farm growing up, I think a woodchuck is the same as a groundhog.
Okay.
They would burrow in, but we'd always be worried that the horses would break their legs in the holes.
Oh yeah, that's good.
We don't have groundhogs here. I would say for us, a lot of it is the layers. Like we have a lot of predators for the layers. So like a hawk and an owl were coming down and getting our layers. Definitely like in the garden, I think as we sort of talked about before, we try to have different plants that attract different types of insects so that they can sort of synergistically work together.
Right.
And for the hawks, I mean, and for the owls, really, we just either move them closer to the house, or we've tried some like shiny things and tried to dissuade them from coming. But their perimeter fence to protect them from like foxes and coyotes, and that is electrified, but aerial wise, they can swoop in and pick up a chicken and be gone, you know. But a little bit of that as well. I feel like that is nature too.
I know, it's so true.
And so, you know, that chicken had a great life. It wasn't stuck in a barn. And yes, it was probably a horrible way for that chicken to die, but that is also nature. That hawk also needs to eat, and so does that owl, and they probably have young they're feeding and all of those things. So a little bit, we sort of not let it go, but we watch for it, but we don't, you know, it's just sort of part of farming.
That's so true. I mean, that's the best way to look at it too. It's just that hawk has its story.
Yes.
Right. It probably has some babies at home it needs to feed. Right.
Exactly. So it's, you know, so I think to go the other way and, you know, put all of our chickens in a barn because a hawk came in and got a few of our chickens, you know, that's not really our philosophy. So like what we talked about earlier, and that is just awareness. So you can't have one thing without affecting another. Right. You know, all action has a consequence.
Right.
So to speak. So if you just make choices that actually truthfully better the soil and our environment instead of sort of that whole philosophy piece, I think that we would be on a better trajectory to be truly regenerative to our environment and heal our planet more so than the philosophy of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think when people start realizing that it's not going to take very long, but we just have to start now.
Mm-hmm. You know? Yeah, I think that there's only 50 years left, I think.
I know.
Topsoil, like that's scary. That's really scary. Now, thankfully, I would say in the last probably 2 years or so, especially with organizations, I see you post it sometime like Kiss the Ground.
Yeah.
And like Zach Bush and like those people that actually, have you watched any of the series, The Carbon Cowboys?
No, I haven't.
So they're really big into regenerative farming too, but they've
I'm gonna follow
conventional farmers and then sort of tried to get them to be regenerative, and it's great. It's like low level reality TV. low quality. But it's sort of catching now. And you
Yeah.
see people that might not even be regenerative farmers, but they're identifying with it. Like they know it's a buzzword now. So they're
Yeah.
saying, and I think even for some of the big companies, like, what's the latest one? They've committed so much of their acreage to regenerative farming, which is amazing.
Right. And that's what we need to see. And the only way that it's going to happen is that if the consumers start pushing it and asking for it. So that's why I think it's important that we're having this conversation. And, I'm trying to dedicate this month on talking about regenerative farming and soil health and introducing books and people and farmers, because we do need to be paying attention and being
Absolutely.
aware and doing our part.
And the more that people know about how their food is raised, the better.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I know I was listening to Bill Maher. I don't know if you watch him at all, but yeah, he was just talking about the factory farming and I think I sent you something on Instagram. I mean, I try not to go down that road and it's kind of my philosophy when I'm with patients too. I rarely ever say, you can't eat this. I try to be sneaky about it and be positive, and then they don't gravitate towards that food anymore. But so I don't really pay too much attention to the factory farming. I know it's there, I know it's bad, but I'd rather be promoting this. But I couldn't believe, like, most of California is factory farmed. It's crazy.
Horrible. Have you ever watched the Natalie Portman video called Eating Animals?
No. My
Yeah.
daughter worked with her on one of her last films,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, she played her niece.
No
And
way.
yeah, Natalie's a beautiful, beautiful human being. And but I remember it's just so hard for me to watch those shows
It
because I'm
is,
not
it
living
is
that way. But I know
deplorable. It
it
is
is
deplorable.
it is really deplorable, and it makes me it just makes me really, really sad. And
But even if
it's
you just like, the whole premise, and I remember Natalie, like as the narrator in the head saying, if people could see
yeah,
this, they would not eat meat. And
I
it's
think,
true.
yeah, it's
Like
true.
when you drive for, 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers, and all you see is all of these little dots that are actually cows crammed in together.
I know.
Like it's,
I can't even, the thought
oh,
of it
so
just,
sad. But it wasn't, I think her message wasn't so much about not eating meat. It was about eating meat that was responsibly raised.
responsible.
And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that that's actually really more the message, because going to all plant, I think we have a long way to get there in order for us to do it regeneratively.
right.
The protein part of it, we have so many more acres to actually get the nutrient density that we need, that
Mhm.
we're going to be a longer time getting there, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I also think like the Impossible and all of that,
I
I mean,
know.
they're chemicals, and then
I
it's more
know.
harmful to the environment. Like,
I know. I know. I
not
tell
more
people
like,
that.
not compared to factory farming, it isn't, but to compare to regenerative. And again, it's, if we focused on feeding communities, these farms would be dotting our landscapes, right? These small
Mhm.
diversified farms, and we would still have that sort of local food system in place. But once we move to feeding the world, we move to giant supply chains, there's less and less small farms, because it's really difficult for them to be sustainable, especially when people are looking for cheap food.
I know.
It's
Yeah.
this dichotomy where we need to shift back to seeing true value in these small local farms that are actually doing a really good job of raising high quality premium pastured meats again, in a way that's healthier for the consumer, better for the
Yeah.
animal, and really heals our planet, because that's what we need.
I know. I agree completely. So I hope that people heard that. If there's anything that we talked about in the last hour, I don't even know how long we've talked for, but that's the most important thing, I think, is really understanding that part.
I agree. And just in closing, I would just say, get to know your local farmer, be curious, do a little drive in the country, find who
Yeah.
those local supporters are, go to your farmer's market.
Yeah. Yeah. And talk to them like we talked at the beginning, like ask them about their soil and their composting. Are they bringing in worms? Do they have ladybug? I don't know, just fun stuff. And that just opens up such a great conversation that,
Absolutely.
gets that probably makes the farmer feel great too. because you're not,
For sure, we're doing
asking.
it. We're doing it as part of the community, right? We love
Yeah,
what we do, and
yeah,
we're able to share our talents and our gifts of growing with
yeah,
other people.
yeah. All right. Well,
Okay.
let's do it. Keep doing it, what you're
All
doing.
right. This has been great, and I hope that we can do it again.
I hope so too. I gotta learn more about your eggs.
Yeah. So let's
Share
do.
that info.
Okay. Do we have to close this off, and then can we talk offline?
Yeah, we could just
Okay. She'll fade it out or whatever.
yeah, yeah.